The air inside the K561 Kazan was thick with the scent of recycled oxygen, hot electronics, and the faint metallic tang of unspent ammunition. Captain Dmitry Volkov, commander of the Spetsnaz detachment, ran a gloved thumb over the cold steel of his suppressed AK-203. 49 of his men sat around him in the cramped torpedo room, their faces etched in shadow, their forms bulky with over 80 pounds of gear. They were silent ghosts, packed into the belly of a steel shark gliding through the thermocline, a cold, dense layer of water that blinded Ukrainian sonar. 12 sharks in total, 12 Yasin-class submarines, a $4.8 billion storm of silent death creeping toward the Odessa coastline. Dmitry checked his chronometer. 0540. Dawn was a pale, hesitant suggestion on the horizon. His mission was the epitome of Spetsnaz doctrine, surgical, swift, and silent. Infiltrate, seize the strategic base, and raise the Russian tricolor before the world had even had its morning coffee. Moscow's planners had called it foolproof. The landing zone was a blind spot, the base garrison was small, and their approach was undetectable. He allowed himself a flicker of professional pride. This was what they were trained for, not the brute force of missile barrages, but the quiet, deadly art of the unseen blade. Each of his men, hand-picked from the best of the naval infantry, could neutralize a sentry post in the time it took an ordinary soldier to chamber a round. Together, all 600 of them were a force of nature. 5 minutes to surface, a voice crackled in his earpiece, the submarine's captain. Dmitry nodded to himself. He scanned the faces of his team. Young Anton, his knuckles white around his rifle, eyes wide with the thrill of his first real drop. Old Sergeant Major Ivan, a slab of granite who had fought in Chechnya and Georgia, his expression as placid as a frozen lake. They were ready. They were the best. What could possibly stand against them? 70 kilometers away, in a windowless concrete bunker buried deep beneath the earth, Colonel Andrei Kovalenko stared at a bank of monitors. The air here was cool and tasted of stale coffee. 6 radar operators sat before him, their eyes tracing the faint rhythmic sweep of the detection grid. For weeks, this room had been a study in agonizing boredom. Tonight, the boredom was about to end. "Anything, Oksana?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that didn't betray the tension coiling in his gut. Lead operator Oksana Petrenko shook her head, not taking her eyes off her main screen. "All quiet, Colonel. The sea is sleeping." Kovalenko sipped his coffee. The American-supplied sensor network, an $85 million investment in vigilance, was his invisible wall. A 1-kilometer perimeter around the base laced with over 240 seismic and motion detectors, all feeding into this room. Above, 14 guard posts provided overlapping fields of thermal and optical vision. Nothing larger than a rabbit was supposed to move without him knowing. He knew the intelligence was solid. A major Russian special operations force was en route. But where? When? The waiting was the worst part. It gnawed at you, planting seeds of doubt. Did they find a way around the network? Is the intel wrong? He walked over to a larger map display, the coastline glowing in soft blues and greens. His plan was a delicate web, a V-shaped funnel designed to channel an attacker into a pre-sighted kill zone. His men were already in position, hidden in camouflage nests and trenches, melting into the landscape. 10 BTR-4E armored vehicles were on standby, their engines cold but their crews on high alert, ready to slam the back door shut on any retreat. It was a perfect trap. But a trap was useless without prey. "Colonel," Oksana said, her voice suddenly sharp. Kovalenko was by her side in an instant. A single, faint blip had appeared on the screen, just inside the 1-kilometer detection ring. It glowed a soft, menacing red. "Confirmation?" Kovalenko asked, his heart beginning to pound a steady, powerful rhythm. "Seismic sensor 11 Bravo," she reported, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Mass and movement consistent with a human-sized target, heavily equipped. Speed 0.2 meters per second." Another blip appeared, then another, and another. Within 5 seconds, the screen was peppered with them, a cascade of red dots flowing inland from the coast. The computer algorithm flashed an alert. Multiple intrusions. Heavily armed, formation, staggered assault. The room, once silent, was now filled with a low, intense hum of activity. "They're here," an operator whispered. Kovalenko picked up a secure handset. There was no panic in his voice, only the cold, hard clarity of a predator whose patience had just been rewarded. "All stations, this is Kestrel," he said calmly. "The foxes are in the henhouse. Repeat, the foxes are in the henhouse. Hold positions. Prepare the trap. Wait for my signal." He placed the handset down and watched the red dots multiply on the screen. They were moving exactly as predicted, flowing into the heart of his V. "Come on," he thought, a grim smile touching his lips. "Just a little further." The wet sand sucked at Dmitri's boots. The air was cool and heavy with the smell of salt and damp earth. His team surfaced and launched their inflatable boats with practiced, silent efficiency. 92 seconds. That's all it took from breaking the surface to having boots on Ukrainian soil. They were ghosts, unseen, unheard, unstoppable. He scanned the terrain through his night vision goggles. Everything was a ghostly green. The coastline was just as the satellite images had shown, a gentle slope with scattered patches of scrub, providing perfect cover. No visible fortifications, no barbed wire. It was almost too easy. "Alpha Team, moving," he whispered into his throat mic. "Bravo, on our flank. 5-man squads, staggered formation. Maintain silence." His men fanned out, their movements fluid and economical. They were a ripple in the darkness, flowing toward the objective just 3.2 kilometers away. A base full of sleeping soldiers who would be their prisoners before the sun cleared the horizon. The thought was intoxicating. This would be a victory studied in military academies for years to come. He felt a prickle of unease, a gut feeling. The silence was too perfect. The lack of patrols too convenient. He pushed the feeling down. It was just nerves, the natural tension before the strike. The first kilometer passed without incident. They were now deep within enemy territory, moving with the confidence of apex predators. Dmitri's squad crested a small rise, and he brought them to a halt with a single hand signal. He peered through his thermal scope, scanning the area ahead. Nothing, just the cold outlines of trees and rocks. And then disaster nearly struck from his own side. "Sir, we've lost the feed from PD-2, an operator in Kovalenko's command center called out. Kovalenko's head snapped toward the UAV monitoring station. The screen for one of his 5 reconnaissance drones had gone black. "Status? Sudden systems failure. It's down. Impact zone estimate. Sector Delta." The operator pointed to a spot on the map, perilously close to the Russian advance. A cold knot formed in Kovalenko's stomach. If the Russians found the wreckage, they'd know they'd been spotted. The entire element of surprise would be gone. For a tense moment, he watched the red dots on the main screen. They didn't stop. They didn't change course. They didn't see it, he thought, breathing a silent sigh of relief. But his relief was short-lived. "Kestrel, this is Hammer 1. A panicked voice crackled over the radio from the BTR-4E flanking group. "We've got a problem. Hammer 3 hit a ditch, blew a hydraulic line. She's immobilized, blocking the farm track." Kovalenko swore under his breath. The flanking maneuver was critical. It was the steel door that would trap the Russians. Now there was a gap. If the Spetsnaz broke and ran for that gap, the encirclement would collapse. He had seconds to react. His mind raced, calculating angles, speeds, and terrain. "Hammer 1, listen to me," he said, his voice a blade cutting through the tension. "Reroute Hammer 2 and Hammer 4 through the northern pasture. It's narrow, but it'll get you there. Push your vehicles to the absolute limit. Do you copy?" "Copy, Kestrel, pushing to max." "Artillery," Kovalenko commanded, turning to another station. "Adjust firing tables. I want a wall of steel covering Sector Gamma 7. Be ready." The gamble was on. The Russians, oblivious, kept moving forward, deeper and deeper into the killing zone. The red dots were now perfectly centered in the V. Every rifleman, every machine gunner was holding his breath, finger resting on the trigger. Kovalenko took one final look at the screen. The trap was set. The flaws were patched. The moment had come. He lifted the handset. "All stations," he said, his voice resonating with cold finality. "Phase 1. Fire." The world exploded. For Dmitri, the first sensation was not sound, but a monstrous vibration that traveled up through the soles of his boots and rattled his teeth. Then came the roar, a sound like the fabric of the sky being torn apart. 6 GSHG 762. Gatling guns, hidden in camouflage nests, opened up simultaneously. The center of his column vanished in a storm of 6,000 rounds per minute. Men who had been living, breathing elite soldiers 1 second were turned into red mist the next. The ground erupted in thousands of tiny geysers of dirt and gore. "Contact! Contact!" Ivan screamed, but his voice was swallowed by the unbelievable noise. Training took over. The survivors scattered, diving for any depression, any rock that offered cover. But it was exactly what the Ukrainians wanted. As soon as they broke formation, the flanks of the V opened up. PKM machine guns and M4 carbines spat fire from dozens of hidden positions. The air filled with the sharp crack of supersonic rounds and the whizzing of ricochets. Green tracers crisscrossed the kill zone, creating an inescapable web of death. Dmitri watched in horror as Anton, the young soldier, took a burst to the chest and was thrown backward like a rag doll. He saw men he had trained with for a decade cut down before they could even aim their rifles. Within 2 minutes, the kill count was catastrophic. 1/5 of his force was gone. Their momentum was shattered. Their silent infiltration had become a deafening slaughterhouse. "Return fire!" Dmitri roared, trying to form a defensive circle, but every time one of his men fired, a mortar round would arc through the sky, guided by an unseen eye, and land with pinpoint accuracy. The drones. They were watching every muzzle flash. He saw it then. The glint of metal to his rear. Armored vehicles. 10 of them, closing off their only path of retreat to the sea. They were encircled. Trapped. Desperation clawed at him. This wasn't a battle, it was an execution. He fumbled for his encrypted VHF radio, his hands slick with sweat. He had one last card to play. A brutal, desperate gambit. "To all subs, this is Vostok 1. We are compromised, pinned down, requesting immediate fire support on our position. Suppress and rescue. I repeat, suppress and rescue." He prayed they were listening. It was their only hope. The distress call sliced through the calm of the Kazan's control room. The submarine's captain didn't hesitate. 6 of the 12 Russian subs immediately adjusted their depth, their crews moving with grim efficiency. On board, the remaining Kaliber cruise missiles, 56 in total, were brought to launch readiness. The order was given. From beneath the waves, 56 steel spears, each weighing over 3,000 pounds, erupted in a rapid succession of compressed air and fire. They broke the surface in plumes of white water, their engines igniting as they rocketed into the pre-dawn sky, streaking towards the Ukrainian base at Mach 0.8. The Russian plan was simple and brutal. Saturate the base's defenses, obliterate everything, and create enough chaos for Dmitri's men to escape in the ensuing hellfire. In Kovalenko's bunker, the atmosphere was electric. "Missile launch detected," Oksana yelled. 56 inbound targets, caliber PL cruise missiles, time to impact, 4 minutes. Kovalenko felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp. This was the moment of truth. His entire defense hinged on the $65 million American-supplied NASAMS-3 system. "Engage," he ordered, his voice unwavering. The Sentinel radars had already locked onto every single incoming threat. On the screens, 72 target tracks were being monitored simultaneously. Outside, 4 NASAMS launchers swiveled, their pods opening to the sky. At EO 556, as the first wave of Kalibers entered engagement range, the launchers fired. 16 AMRAAM interceptors screamed off their rails in less than 20 seconds, their rocket motors painting fiery lines against the dark canvas of the sky. Each interceptor, traveling at 4 times the speed of sound, closed the distance with terrifying speed. The radar operators worked in near silence, their faces bathed in the glow of the screens. The only sounds were the rapid lock-on tones and Kovalenko's steady voice. Next wave, engage. High above the base, the sky became a tapestry of fire and destruction. Proximity-fused fragmentation warheads detonated, shredding the incoming calibers into thousands of pieces of tumbling, harmless metal. Not a single explosion touched the Ukrainian base. By ORY-58, it was over. Oksana looked up from her console, her eyes wide with disbelief and triumph. All targets neutralized, Colonel. All 56. A 100% kill rate. A wave of quiet, profound relief washed through the command center. They had held. The failure of the missile strike sent a shockwave of despair through the trapped Spetsnaz. Dmitri heard the distant, thunderous booms of the interceptions, but saw none of the promised fire raining down on his enemies. The promised rescue had failed. They were alone. Kovalenko didn't hesitate. He had broken their sword. Now he would break their shield. "Coastal batteries," he commanded. "Target submerged hostiles at last known coordinates. Launch the Polonaise." U-10 RPK-300 Polonaise anti-submarine missiles launched from their hidden coastal positions. They flew for several kilometers before releasing their deadly payload, guided torpedoes that plunged into the Black Sea, their acoustic seekers instantly homing in on the signatures of the Russian submarines. Minutes later, 5 massive, muffled detonations rolled through the water, so powerful that the soldiers on the shore could feel the vibrations through the ground. 5 Russian submarines, a combined value of $2 billion, were torn apart, their twisted hulls sinking to the seabed. The 7 surviving vessels, their crews gripped by terror, dove deep and fled at full speed, abandoning their elite soldiers to their fate. The roar of the underwater explosions faded into a grim silence over the battlefield. For the 600 Spetsnaz, it was the sound of their last hope dying. Kovalenko ordered the BTR-4Es to close the final 200 meters, their 30mm autocannons sweeping the tree lines and craters where the last pockets of resistance were hiding. Overhead, the remaining PD-2 drones descended, their cameras providing real-time GPS coordinates to mortar teams. Each round landed with surgical precision. By Aero 605, the Russian force had ceased to exist as a cohesive unit. The UAV feeds showed a grim tableau of destruction. The few remaining soldiers, fewer than 170, were low on ammunition, their encrypted radios crackling with fragments of desperation. No extraction. Low ammo. Request last stand. But Kovalenko wasn't going to grant them a glorious last stand. He initiated Operation Silent Net. 4 mobile loudspeakers were driven to the perimeter, broadcasting surrender demands in Russian. At the same time, UAVs dropped small thermobaric charges nearby, not to kill, but to create terrifying fireballs that served as a visceral reminder that they were being watched, that they could be eliminated at any moment. The psychological effect was devastating. On the infrared drone feeds, Kovalenko watched as clusters of Russian soldiers began to discard their helmets, their will to fight extinguished. Some waved improvised white flags made from torn shirts. At 0611, the first group of 23 Spetsnaz emerged from a ditch, their hands on their heads, their faces a mask of exhaustion and defeat. Dmitri was among them. He dropped his AK-203 into the mud, the weapon that had been his constant companion, and raised his empty hands to the sky. It was over. By Aero 618, the surrender was total. The pride of Moscow's naval special forces, the 600 elite ghosts who were supposed to seize victory before sunrise, were now disarmed prisoners of war. The entire engagement, from the first detection to the final surrender, had lasted less than 40 minutes. Ukrainian casualties, 4 wounded. Kovalenko stood on a small rise overlooking the secured battlefield as the morning sun finally broke over the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. He felt no elation, only a profound and weary sense of finality. It wasn't a victory of passion or brute force. It was a victory of information, of precision, of turning an enemy's greatest strength, their stealth, into their fatal weakness. An invisible wall of data and coordination had held back the deep. The story you've just witnessed, though fictional, illustrates a stark reality of modern warfare. It's a powerful reminder that in the 21st century, the deadliest weapon isn't always the biggest missile or the most elite soldier. True power lies in information, surveillance, and the seamless integration of technology. Stealth and surprise are rendered meaningless when your opponent can see every move you make before you even make it. This was not just a battle of bullets and steel, it was a battle of sensors and algorithms, where victory was decided not on the front lines, but in the quiet, focused hum of a command center. What do you think is the most crucial element in modern defense? Advanced technology, elite soldiers, or superior strategy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in the importance of sharing these stories and understanding the dynamics of today's world, please support us by liking, subscribing to the channel, and sharing this video. Your support ensures the truth continues to reach as many people as possible.